So when we talk about the drone industry in Asia, we first have to acknowledge the enormous presence of China, right? That China did not simply become successful by manufacturing good drones. It builds the entire ecosystem around them: components, batteries, motors, cameras, a very large domestic market. And that combination allowed Chinese companies to improve their products very quickly and bring them to market at highly competitive prices. So everybody understand the name DJI. DJI is the most visible example, but the ecosystem is much broader than just one company in mainland China. So what is changing now is that a drone are no longer viewed simply as electronic products. They are increasingly treated as a strategic infrastructure. Governments are asking questions such as: where is the data stored? Who controls the software? Where were the critical components made? And can the supply chain still function during a geopolitical crisis? So the Asian drone market is gradually dividing into two layers, I think. China remains extremely strong in terms of scale and commercial competitiveness, but at the same time, Taiwan and also Japan, South Korea, and several Southeast Asian countries are trying to build alternative supply chains that are considered more secure and politically trusted. The important point here is that this is no longer just a competition between individual drone manufacturers. It is becoming a competition between industrial ecosystems. So that's the basic line.
So, where is Taiwan in this journey? I mean, China is seems to be so far ahead. Where are we in the grand scope of things?
Sure. So I would say Taiwan entered the drone industry for three main reasons. The first is national security. Of course, the war in Ukraine demonstrates that relatively inexpensive drones can have a strategic impact on the battlefield. For Taiwan, that lesson is obvious, very relevant. The second is supply chain security. Taiwan understands that relying on Chinese made drones or critical Chinese components would create a serious vulnerability, particularly during the crisis across the Taiwan Strait. And the third reason is industrial opportunity. As the United States and the other democratic countries become more cautious about Chinese technology, they are looking for alternative suppliers. Taiwan sees an opportunity to use its existing strengths in electronics, semiconductors, communications, and precision manufacturing. So Taiwan's entry was not prompted by the belief that it could immediately build another DJI. It was prompted by the realization that drone had become strategically important and that a trusted alternative supply chain was needed. And it's this one as a global scale. In other words, Taiwan did not initially enter the race because of the consumer drone market. It entered because the strategic meaning of drones had changed.
Okay. So, what has Taiwan done to play catch up, and can it catch up given that it seems to be a little bit behind China on the drone development front?
Everybody's behind from the mainland China for sure, but Taiwan has taken several important steps, I feel. It has created industrial clusters, encouraged collaboration between established electronic manufacturers and younger drone companies, and used government procurement to create a domestic demand. That is very important. The government has also positioned drone as one of its strategic industries and has publicly stated that it wants Taiwan to become an Asian Pacific hub for democratic drone supply chain. The scale of support is also becoming more serious. Taiwan approved a 6 year drone industry development program running from 2025 to 2030 with the massive volume of the national budget. So the Taiwan's government reported that a domestic drone industry output reached 12.9 billion Taiwan dollars in 2025, more than 2.5 times the previous year, while exports of completed drone increased significantly. So it grows so quickly right now. But can Taiwan truly catch up with China? I think we need to be precise about what catch up really means. If it means matching China's production volume, cost structure, and complete components ecosystem, that would be extremely difficult, I would say. China has spent many years building that advantage, but Taiwan does not necessarily need to reproduce the Chinese model. It can complete in selected area where trust, security, communication technology, AI, semiconductors, and advanced manufacturing matter more than the lowest possible price. Taiwan's biggest challenge is not the technology alone, it is creating stable demand and giving companies enough certainty to invest in production capacity. Drone companies cannot build factories and supply chains based only on political speeches, right? They
Mhm.
need a predictable procurements, export opportunities, and long-term customers. So yes, Taiwan can catch up in strategically important segments, but it is unlikely to succeed by trying to become a smaller version of mainland China.
All right, let's talk about commercial versus defense drone applications. How is Taiwan doing on either front?
At the moment, defense is clearly the stronger driver of Taiwan's drone industry. Of course, this is not just in Taiwan. So was Japan, so was US. Like all of a sudden, drone industry, like defense became like the strongest drivers. So that is understandable. Taiwan has an immediate security requirement, and the defense procurement can create the volume that domestic manufacturers need in order to scale. The government is moving towards large procurements of domestically produced unmanned systems, including surveillance, attack, and maritime platforms. Taiwan also has some technically interesting companies working on areas such as autonomous systems, communications, swarm technologies, and counter drone capabilities. The commercial side is more mixed. Taiwan certainly has drone for surveying agriculture, infrastructure inspection, and public safety applications. However, it has not yet developed a commercial ecosystem comparable to China's. Many Taiwanese companies still depend heavily on government supported projects, defense related demand, or overseas partnerships. This creates a risk. A drone industry cannot remain healthy if it depends on one large military procurement cycle, right? The commercial applications give companies recurring operational experience. They force manufacturers to improve reliability, maintenance, softwares, trainings, and customer support. Those capabilities can also strengthen defense products. So, I do not see commercials and defense drones as two completely separate industries. They reinforce each other's. Taiwan is currently stronger on the defense policy side, but building a broader commercial market will be essential if it wants sustainable industry rather than simply a temporary defense production programs.
Okay. Now, what is the state of play in terms of Taiwan's drone industry today? The term non-red supply chain is used a lot. What does that actually mean to somebody
So,
who's looking to obtain or to make drones?
So I hear a lot about a known red supply chains in Taiwan. So the word known red supply chain is a phrase that is used very frequently, but it can be misleading if it is not clearly defined. At the simplest level, it means building a drone without relying on a component, software, or infrastructure controlled by the companies from mainland China. But in practice, that definition is a little bit more complicated. Does it mean that the final assembly must take place outside China? Or does every motor, camera, communication modules, and flight controller also have to be non Chinese? What about software development tools? What about a cloud storage? And who verify where each component actually comes from? So a known red supply chain requires much more than the changing the label on the finished product. It requires components traceability, cybersecurity standards, trusted softwares, secure data management, and increasingly independent testing and certification. This is why I prefer the term trusted supply chain. The objective should not simply be to exclude one country. The objective should be to create a system in which government and customers can verify the origin, security, and reliability of the product. So today, Taiwan has made real progress. It has strong political support, an increasingly organized industrial base, and world-class capabilities in electronics and semiconductor manufacturing. The government's stated the goal is to make Taiwan as an Asian Pacific hub for the democratic drone supply chain rather than merely a domestic producer.
Okay. Lastly, Japan, I've heard this said a lot, and I know that you've advocated this, that Japan as a natural partner for Taiwan in terms of drone development. Can you explain that?
Yes, of course. So that Japan sees Taiwan a very important market slash partners. So Japan and Taiwan are natural partners, but not because they have exactly the same strengths. They're naturally partners because their strengths and weakness are complementary. Taiwan has a high agile electronic ecosystem. It is strong in semiconductors, communications equipment, contract manufacturing, and rapidly turning designs into physical products. Japan has a strong capabilities in precision engineering, sensors, robots, materials, motors, and specialized industrial applications. Japan also has a very large infrastructure maintenance market where drone can be used for the inspecting bridges, tunnels, power plants, sewer system, and the other difficult environment. But at the same time, Japan's weakness is often speed. We have excellent technology, but the commercialization, procurement, and international expansion can take too long. Taiwan, by contrast, can move quickly, but its domestic market is relatively small, smaller than Japan for sure. Taiwanese companies, therefore, need international partners and real world application outside Taiwan. That creates a natural division of roles. Japanese company can contribute specialized technology, demanding use cases, and access to infrastructure operators. Taiwanese companies can contribute manufacturing flexibility, electronic integration, and a connection to international supply chain. But I do not think the goal should be for Japan and Taiwan to create an isolated drone bloc. This is where the concept I say that trusted corridor becomes important. Japan and Taiwan should connect their ecosystem with the United States, Europe, Ukraine, and trusted partners in Southeast Asia. That corridor should include not only manufacturing, but also testing, certification, operation data, training, and access to customers. My concern is that countries sometimes interpret sovereignty as meaning that everything must be produced domestically, but sovereignty without connectivity can become isolation. Neither Japan nor Taiwan can independently reproduce the entire Chinese drone ecosystem. Working together, however, they can help create a trusted international network that gives drone companies an alternative path to scale. That, in my view, is the real strategic opportunity for Japan and Taiwan.